to tap into your expertise and knowledge now because 20 million views, you have a lot to offer. So, what would you say makes really good storytelling? Do you have yourself any particular approach to it when you work on a project and something that works well for you?
You know, even to refer to myself as a mentor for anyone feels a little bit strange because I don't think of myself as an elder, but I have always looked for the elders, my elders, the people that I can go to look for. We think about social impact and environment and education and human rights. We think about them as separate things because it's easier sort of to think of it that way. But in my experience and in looking at the world sort of from a systems level, they're all interconnected. You can't really address one of them without also addressing the other one. I have my moments certainly of feeling, very down about the state of the world. But I think that it's times like these that are the most rich with opportunity. And it's the time when people that you least expect to do something transformative do it. They're putting their own reputation on the line to take a stand for something that they think is right. And, while they have experienced success in one area, nothing is guaranteed. We live in a culture today where people get canceled left and right for various things. And to take a public stance on important issues, I think, is a courageous act. We all are activists by default. That's my view. Even if we don't go to any marches or sign any petitions or do anything like that or give money, we're going out and purchasing things. That's a form of activism because we're making statements with what we purchase. I think nuance is something that we are sorely lacking in our society, especially with the prevalence of social media. If prevalence is an understatement, everything is in these bite-sized chunks. We want to be updated. We want to know what happened in like 30 seconds or less. And that does not leave a lot of space for nuance. One day I was driving and I said, all of us, that's what it is, because it really is all of us. It's really about the team. One of my mentors always says, all great work is done in teams.
Ben, you are an award-winning filmmaker based in New York and the founder and director of All of Us Films. So first question, why All of Us? What's the meaning behind the name for you? Is there one?
When I started the company, I at first called it Footage Films. Footage Films, I liked the name because it was, two F's. And it sounded good, but nobody knew what we did. So when we really were clear that we were committed to social impact filmmaking, I said, we need a better name. We need a name that really exemplifies what we do and who we are. And I was driving, it was really a few years I was trying to think of the right name and brainstorming with people, came up with great ideas. A lot of them were taken. But one day I was driving and I said, all of us, that's what it is, because it really is all of us. It's really about the team. One of my mentors always says, all great work is done in teams. So all of us, that's the essence of what we do.
Yeah, very, very good name. I love it. And you will see this through the conversation. It really echoes what you aim to do and your mission. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get into filming in the first place as a career? I find the original story is always interesting.
Yeah, so, as a kid, I was always interested in film and video. I would borrow my dad's video camera with or without permission and try different things, try to do claymation and different just creative projects. And then as a kid, I got into dance. I had an amazing dance program that came into my public school in New York City called National Dance Institute that I'm still very much involved with. And I started at a young age to choreograph dance. And I was mentored by them, by the teachers there, and started to eventually film my choreography. And then I started to choreograph the cameras around the dancers, and I thought, if I can do this, what else can I do with film? And it really got me very interested in going into film. I studied film, mostly theory, in college, and it's just something that I became super passionate about. But it was really through dance that I got into film.
Wow, so it was TikTok before the end of TikTok.
There you go.
Amazing. So you've been doing this a long time and it's a
Yes.
long-term passion. That's good to know. So you believe in the power of film to transform the world, if I can sum up your mission. Can you tell us about your passion around that? Because it's not just about film, it's about the purpose of what you do with it.
That's true. I always have felt driven by purpose. You know, there's amazing films that are out there solely for the art of filmmaking, and that's a beautiful thing. What I do and what my team and I do is really driven by the why. So I'm always kind of obsessed with what's the reason that we're doing this. So I remember working before I started this company, working in commercial production, doing a lot of really interesting commercials and TV spots and things like that. And I learned a lot, and it was, you know, technically really interesting. Creatively, there was some really big learnings for me there, and I learned a lot about how to run a business. And at the same time, you know, what I was helping to sell was not inspiring me. And I thought, you know, if we can use all these same tools to sell or promote positive things that are good for the earth, like, could that be a business that could actually thrive as a business? That was 13 years ago almost. So, you know, so far we're doing it. But it really is that belief that let's make incredible work that's at the same level as all these other projects that are, you know, solely for profit. But let's do it for things that are going to actually improve the planet and the place that we all call home. And not to say that profit is a bad thing. Profit is great, but it can be that sort of triple bottom line theory of people, planet, profit, all of those things working in harmony.
Yeah, absolutely. That really echoes my own passion and what drives me as well. And that probably echoes, you know, what many people in the impact space would say as well. If we can marry everything together, that's the best, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, as you are into films, I wanted to ask you, are there films that you haven't filmed yourself, but that you have particularly liked and that have particularly touched you? And could you tell us which ones and why, if you can cite something?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's so many great films out there, and I love to learn from other filmmakers and other, you know, other work that's been done that it really inspires me, especially if there's something mission driven in there. One of the earliest documentaries that I felt really affected me was called Mad Hot Ballroom, which is about children learning to dance in public schools in New York, which is, you know, similar to an experience that I had. I wasn't doing ballroom dance per se, but it was this beautiful expression of how dance is integrated into children's lives and in a way that you wouldn't expect. So that was something that really impacted me. And maybe we'll get to talk a little bit later about a project I'm working on now that's touching on similar themes. Another movie that I really love and definitely affected my life is Kiss the Ground, which was on Netflix, is about to be on Amazon Prime, I think starting on Earth Day. And I had seen that movie around when it came out in 2020 on Netflix, and I watched it myself, and I was really impressed with the power of regenerative agriculture. It's something I knew a little bit about through the environmental work I had done, but not very much. And I watched it, and I told my wife, Marielle, I said, we've got to watch this movie. So I watched it a second time with her, and we got the first 20 minutes are pretty like doom and gloom. So it's like, it's intense. And she said, let's turn it off. I don't want to see anymore. And I said, come on, it gets better. Let's watch the rest of the movie. We watched it. And at the end, you know, we looked at each other, we said, what should we do? Should we buy a farm? Like, how do we contribute to sucking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it back in the ground? And it's this incredible project. So that got me very passionate about regenerative agriculture. I discovered at that point that there was a nonprofit called Kiss the Ground that had been behind the movie. Yeah. And I said, well, who are these people? What are they doing? So we started making like really small monthly donations to this nonprofit just to do something, to feel like we were taking action. It was the middle of the pandemic, you know, wanted to be involved in some way. And I got an email from maybe a month or two later from the CEO of Kiss the Ground saying, thank you for the donations. And I thought it was a form email at first. And then I realized, he said, and by the way, I checked out your website, you do really great work, maybe we can collaborate. Fast forward, we've been doing tons of documentary projects with Kiss the Ground for the last few years. It's an amazing partnership, and it's a way that we get to participate in the regenerative movement And I personally have been to all these farms now across the country, filming with farmers who are literally on the ground, doing that work of working in harmony with nature, figuring out how to make a profit and do these regenerative practices, and working to fight climate change. It's just an incredible. That's a movie that like really directly affected my life. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I love the whole story really, and how you almost became a farmer out of it. But that really shows the power of film, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
it's incredible that you got to then collaborate with the people behind it in the end, which is great. I've often heard people cite Kiss the Ground. It is an excellent film, and more people need to see it because I'm like you, I love everything around regenerative agriculture. It is so eye-opening.
It really is. And like, one of the things that I've loved about what we've gotten to do together with them is we do these short, like 10 to 12 minute documentary episodes for a series they have called Stories of Regeneration. So, if you don't have time to watch the full movie, you can watch these shorter stories, which are different than the stories that are in the movie, but equally powerful. So it's been an amazing journey, and just seeing, how different people can interact with agriculture and the way that we get our food.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's what it is about. It's where does our food come from and how does it impact us and the planet, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
So I know you do a lot around the environment, but your focus is also very much on social impact. I think that's also something that makes you stand out. So I wanted to ask you, why social impact? What is it about social impact that drives you more particularly? And what are you aiming to achieve through it?
It's a great question. We think about social impact and environment and education and human rights. We think about them as separate things because it's easier sort of to think of it that way. But in my experience and in looking at the world sort of from a systems level, they're all interconnected. You can't really address one of them without also addressing the other ones. So if you're working on environment, that's intrinsically tied to human rights and equality and racial disparities, and all different kinds of things, climate change and who's on the front lines of climate change. All of those kinds of things are intrinsically linked. We have shortages of things throughout the world. We have populations moving throughout different parts of the world. All these things are connected to each other. So for me, social impact encompasses all of those things. It's sort of like the umbrella for everything that we do. And it's, basically posing the question, how are we going to use the work that we do to improve the world that we live in? Whether that's, for human beings, for the rest of the natural world, which we're a part of also. And what can we do to just leave things better than the way that we found them? Which is hard these days because it doesn't look like it's so easy to leave the world any better than the way we were born into it. But that's, I believe, the job that we can take on if we choose to.
I love that you make the link to social and environmental impact because, as you said, they are totally linked. We need to make the link more because there are a lot of stories that are being told about environmental challenges, waste, pollution, degradation, deforestation, you name it. But it's like, how does it impact people? And we need to tell these stories more because this is what makes the link and perhaps what also will make people realize how important it is. Ben, so you specialize in telling emotionally powerful, true stories of social good in the world. Could you tell us who are the people or the organizations you are working with or you have worked with? And has there been any important milestones throughout your career to understand that better?
I've been privileged to work with some really, really amazing people and organizations. Pretty much really in every area that we focus on. We've worked with some just incredible people and organizations that care so much about what they're doing and that are really having an impact. And that's, part of my thinking in running this company is really about not just creating something that's nice or that feels good or that, makes people get a warm and fuzzy feeling. It's like, what are you doing with that feeling afterwards? How does the campaign that we're creating or the film that we're making make some sort of imperative to take positive action? So our work with Kiss the Ground, like I said, has been terrific in that way. We've done amazing projects. We worked for about 8 years or so with the UN Environment Program, doing all kinds of really fascinating projects for them. One was about beating plastic pollution, so people taking a pledge to stop using single-use plastic. That was a crazy impact all over the world. People taking this sort of ice bucket style challenge and tagging other people. We really helped to create that campaign from the ground up, which was a beautiful experience. We've worked a lot, like I was going to say, with National Dance Institute, that program that I grew up dancing in as a kid, and seeing that work being supported and then affecting all of these other children now who are in the program is a beautiful thing. So, and there's another one I would love to mention called STEM from Dance, which is a nonprofit that works with girls of color, teaching them STEM through dance. So they're using dance as a way to expose these children to science and technology and different kinds of engineering and programming skills and mathematics. It's this great way of bridging two things which shouldn't feel so distant, but many times they do. So from small organizations to large global organizations, we've gotten to work with some amazing client partners that it's obvious that what we're doing is making a difference and helping to really support those organizations and spread their mission in their community and around the world.
That's great, and that's what we want, isn't it?
Yes.
So you cover quite a broad range of topics, from the environment to human rights, social and racial justice, or education. Can you give us some project highlights for each one of these 4 areas to really bring them to life for us?
Absolutely. Yeah, so environment, I think we've talked about environment a bit, so I'll move on from that one. Human rights, there's so many issues going on with human rights these days, and always. There was one project that we worked with Human Rights First on, where there's an organization that is helping to support migrants who are crossing the border from Belarus into Poland, and getting sort of stuck in this forested area along the border there and pushed back and forth by the governments. And these people have nowhere else to go. They're, stuck in this area, and at least when we did this film about them, the human rights organizations were not allowed in to help these people that were stuck in this forest in freezing cold weather, really harsh conditions. So we got to help tell some of those stories, and that's something that felt just very powerful and personal to me. Some of the homes where people were being sheltered right along that border, the grandparents of those same people had sheltered Jews during the Holocaust in those same homes. It's just like, seeing how history repeats itself, wild, and a privilege to be able to be involved in that kind of storytelling. Social and racial justice, like I said, so many things, there's so many intersections there. I think that the STEM from Dance organization really exemplifies a lot of that work in terms of trying to help bring so much of, I think, what STEM from Dance does is helping these young people to see themselves in roles that they haven't been represented in the past, or people that look like them may not be represented as role models so much. And it gives them an opportunity to see a future for themselves in these areas. That, I think, such a big and important part of the process. Everyone being able to see people that look like them to be able to be role models. Whether sometimes it's looking like someone on the outside, sometimes it's relating with someone from what's on the inside. But that ability to see oneself going in a particular direction, I think, is very important. And education, we've worked with a lot of different educational organizations. I think, to me, one of the biggest and most important things we can do today is to help bring the arts into mainstream education. Having been exposed to the arts as a child myself and seeing how that's affected my life and being in touch with other people who have had that experience and seeing how they, years and years later, whether or not they're in the arts, that exposure to the arts helps them have that experience of being a full human being. And that's what that's about. It's not, the arts cannot be a separate sort of extracurricular thing. They have to be integrated into our lives starting in childhood. And so the work that we've done with National Dance Institute in supporting their programs that bring dance into public schools during the school day is so important. And it's things like that that help, just create a healthy society where people are fully expressed.
I was actually not expecting you to talk about the arts today, but I'm like so pleasantly surprised because I don't think we've ever discussed it together, but the arts are so important to me as well. So yeah, the fact that you really integrate this in your work and that you see the benefits of it, that's amazing. I also love what you said about social and racial justice and really the importance to be understood, whether it's, as you say, physically or through experience, really. Right. That's just so important. So if you had to pick one project you've worked on in your career that you are particularly proud of, what would it be and why?
That's a hard one. I was thinking about that beforehand and just trying to think, what would that be? Because I'm gonna cheat in this answer. What I'm really proud of is having started this company. That is an ongoing project that, has started but not ended by any means, and it's exciting every day to get to reinvent and re-figure out what our company, what our team is going to be, what we're going to do, how we're going to show up in the world, what we're going to provide. And it's sort of like an ongoing act of creating. So that this project of having a company is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And it's a lot of hard work. And sometimes it's really difficult, but it's also very rewarding. So it's something that I don't take lightly. I think it's a privilege and a responsibility. Yeah, but it's definitely something I'm very proud of.
I love your answer, and I'm a great admirer of what you do. And I think when someone has done it for a long time as well, it really shows the commitment and the dedication and the passion, for your mission and what you do. So you have filmed many people, and I'm going to cite some celebrities, but obviously you filmed many people other than celebrities, but you've worked with Gisele Bündchen, Martin Sheen, David Attenborough or Greta Thunberg. So I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people are moving towards being activists today, which I like. I like to see that movement. So I wanted to ask you, what qualities would you say all of these activists that you've met or you meet every day have in common that you admire?
Wow. So first of all, I want to say I haven't had the pleasure of meeting all of them in person. Some of them we worked on the films, but didn't get to meet them.
Teams.
But what's amazing about activists, especially people who are well known already, they might be a celebrity and sort of take a public stance on something. Some people sort of don't like to see celebrities taking public stances on important issues. I think it's very courageous, and the reason I say that is because many times they're putting their own reputation on the line to take a stand for something that they think is right. And while they have experienced success in one area, nothing is guaranteed. We live in a culture today where people get canceled left and right for various things. And to take a public stance on important issues, I think, is a courageous act. And we have, the other thing I'll say is that, what's beautiful about, I think, humanity is that we're not going to agree on everything. It's not that I necessarily agree with every single stance of every person I've ever worked with, but we can still find ways to work together and still find ways to be productive. And that, I think, especially, when you talk about the environmental work, all of those people that you cited have done such amazing work for the environment. Martin Sheen is the executive producer on our film about labor trafficking, and he's just, such a wonderful human being to collaborate with. He genuinely cares. And all of the celebrities that we've worked with who take an active role in some sort of cause, they don't have to do that. They're choosing to do that, and it's something that I really admire. They're really putting their name out there. They're putting their reputation on the line. I don't take that lightly.
Yeah, definitely. It is true. We can see a lot of backlash, especially on celebrities, which I think is always a shame, but it's telling of something, isn't it? But I think for anybody, even if you're not famous, to really raise your voice and, aim to do it for good, I do think it takes a lot of courage because you do expose yourself.
That's right. That's right. And I think, that's part of what I hope to do with the work that we're doing is inspiring people to take an action. So they see some film that we've done or some PSA or commercial or something, and they're inspired to do something about it. Whether that's activism in one form or another, we all are activists by default. That's my view. When even if we don't go to any marches or sign any petitions or do anything like that or give money, we're going out and purchasing things. That's a form of activism because we're making statements with what we
Yeah.
purchase. We are choosing where we go for the most part. We're taking actions every day that are either supporting one thing or another. And so to be conscious of those actions and the ways that they support different things is the beginning, I think, of activism and something that anyone can do.
Absolutely. So every experience is different and is interesting in its own right. But I wanted to ask you, is there someone or an organization you have particularly enjoyed working with and why?
That's a great question. I feel like I've probably mentioned a lot of them already that really stand out to me. One of the things that I love about the work that I do is being able to sort of have permission to get into people's lives in a deep way in a very short period of time. So as a documentary director, you go in and you're there with a crew and you sort of have this access to people, that most of us don't have on a day-to-day basis. So to me, it's the people that I've gotten to interview and gotten to speak with who've had these, really phenomenal life experiences, or sometimes things that feel very ordinary and relatable, but it's in a context that's unusual. Those are the people that I'd say I appreciate so much. They surprise me. They are so generous with their giving and how open they become. One person that's just coming to mind right now, and again, there's so many. I'm so fortunate in that way. There is a man named Bob Jester who we filmed a piece for Technology, which is a tech company that they're involved in producing the chips that are in a lot of the tech that we use every day. And this man, Bob Jester, had been cleaning a chimney and fell off of a roof and got paralyzed from the waist down. And he, through his recovery, became addicted to opioids and then was introduced to virtual reality headsets, VR, as a way to get off of opioids. And this guy got himself completely off of opioids. When we spoke with him, which was already years ago at this point, he was moving his legs in ways that the doctors had told him would never be possible. This is a person who, so many times we hear stories about people succumbing to opioids or having opioid overdoses and dying. That could have been his path, and he is, not a well-known, famous person who's done, all this scientific research. He's a guy that applied this to himself. And that is incredible. I see him as such a role model. So he's one person that really comes to mind as I feel so grateful to have had that experience with him.
Yeah. I totally understand that you do create like almost such deeper special moments with the people you film, right?
Yeah.
In a way, it's not the same, but every guest I have on the podcast, we get to have an hour, sometimes a 2-hour long conversation that we would never have otherwise. And it makes connections so much more interesting,
That's
isn't
right.
it?
Yeah.
So for someone like you who has spent many years aiming to create impact through storytelling, what is your overall view of the world today? I wanted to ask you this as a generic question because we know there is a lot happening. But if we look at it through that social and environmental lens in today's context in 2025, what's your overall view of the world today?
It depends on the day. I think it's a tough. We're in a really tough moment. You know, there's this. I don't know where it comes from, but there's this wish, this blessing for people that, you know, may you live in uninteresting times. I think for much of my life, I thought that I lived in, you know, relatively calm, at least where I live, and uninteresting times. And you know, in the last decade or so, I'd say that's been pretty much blown out of the water. So we live in wild times where things that we maybe a few years ago never thought were possible are happening, some for the good and some for the really bad. And I think I'm a hopeless optimist or hopeful optimist. I'm endlessly optimistic. I have my moments certainly of feeling, you know, very down about the state of the world. But I think that it's times like these that are the most rich with opportunity. And it's the time when people that you least expect to do something transformative do it. So I really believe that all of us have these opportunities. Some of them are really small and some of them feel really big. Some of them might feel small but actually be big. You never know what that moment is that's going to be that opportunity to make a difference. And it may not be the difference, but if everyone's doing that and everyone starts to make a difference the way that they can in their community, in their family, in their town, in their city, that does have an impact. And you don't necessarily see it right away, but you do see it over time. So I know that, you know, many people feel depressed and hopeless and, you know, kind of in this liminal space of what's going to happen next. And I think that's fair and understandable. And I feel that way too sometimes. But I also think like this is the moment to roll up our sleeves and do the important work, create community, create connections. This is what we have to be doing.
Yeah. I certainly share your sentiments that, you know, what we thought was stable can be shattered, sometimes in an instant. You know, if there is a wildfire, for example, you lose your home, etc. Or a hurricane, or, you know, whatever it can be. It's really crazy. I also have more and more of a feeling that because we are going through such transitions that are necessary, it's almost as if, yeah, it is reflected today in the chaos. We are kind of in the middle of the decade now. Personally, that's my view. It's like the chaos we are seeing today, it's almost like a necessary step of the transition that we are taking. I
Right.
don't know.
Right, and you know, if you take a long view at history, it's actually unusual to be living in a peaceful time, to be living in a time when
Yeah.
everything's okay. And I think I grew up thinking, oh yeah, you know, everything is kind of stable. And then with this sort of chaos, like you're saying that many of us are experiencing and witnessing in the world, I think it's actually more of the norm that human beings have experienced for, you know, the duration of human history. So the fact that we're in it and we're really feeling it, of course, there have been people throughout our lifetimes that have been feeling it the whole time. Now that many more of us are feeling it, I think it's like we're kind of joining the typical human experience in many ways, and it can be a real wake-up call.
So Ben, your work has garnered over 20 million views online and on television. So congratulations, first of all, because it's easy to throw figures like this, but there is a lot of work that has brought you to this point, obviously. So I wanted to ask you, with this in mind, what does impact mean to you now? Do you feel that sometimes you can pause and reflect with pride on what you've achieved? Or does it feel like just a drop in the ocean and there is still so much to do? A lot of people have that sentiment as well. So what is it for you today?
It's both. You know, it's always both. I think, you know, there's times when, you know, you receive news of, you know, oh, 2 billion people viewed this thing, or, you know, whatever that is, and that feels very celebratory and important, and like, you know, wow, whatever this is that we created resonated with people so much that they saw it and they shared it and they, you know, did something with it. And that's great, and I think it is something to celebrate. I certainly feel good when that happens. And at the same time, it's a reminder that, okay, all these people viewed this really important stuff, and there's still a lot of stuff that's wrong in the world. So we have a lot of work to do. And it's not that we can't rest on those laurels. We have to use that as a basis. You know, sometimes it's those kinds of things that open a conversation, that people say, oh, well, you know, your work has gotten this many views, let's talk about this other project. So it might open a door to something else, and then hopefully with that we're creating more impact. I think it's both. I think a person benefits from having a balanced perspective. I certainly do, trying to keep it balanced of like all the work that's left to do and also celebrating the accomplishments, and trying to balance those is kind of an ongoing job. It can be very easy to feel overwhelmed by all the work that there is to do. But I even appreciate the question because it makes me pause and sort of reflect a little bit and appreciate those successes along the way.
So we are going to tap into your expertise and knowledge now, because 20 million views, you have a lot to offer. So what would you say makes really good storytelling? Do you have yourself any particular approach to it when you work on a project, and something that works well for you?
I think, in the work that I do, we deal with a lot of big themes, big ideas, big sort of problems. And what I have found, which may not sound earth-shattering to a lot of people, is that it's the personal stories that resonate the most. So if you want to tackle a big issue in a film, in a book, in an article, in whatever it is, make it personal. And so then you get into this other question of, okay, we're going to focus on personal stories, but then we also want to make those stories feel universal. So how do we focus on these hyper-personal stories, but also make them relatable for people who have no experience in this particular area? So, for example, we make these films about farmers. We want people to see them who are not farmers. We want farmers to relate to it too, but we also want people who are eaters and not farmers to relate to these human beings. So we're making these stories very, very personal, but then there's all these elements that we look for: family, ownership, stewardship of the land, struggle, conflict, all these themes that we all experience every day in our lives. So those are the things that when a person can be on a journey with someone in a film, then they can be opened up to this whole other area. The film that we're working on about labor trafficking in the United States, called To Be Free, most people cannot imagine what it's like to be in a situation of slavery. Most people have not had that experience. So most people also don't know that there is this modern day form of slavery that's so prevalent throughout the United States, also throughout the world. Our film is focusing on the US. So in order to bring that awareness and the interest in the topic, we have to make it very, very personal. And so those stories that we're sharing are survivor stories told by survivors themselves. My goal is that people will grow to care a lot more about this issue and look for it and be active about it in some way because they related to those personal stories.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think everybody that I've interviewed who works more with storytelling have always answered the same thing. And I remember someone who supports refugees in the UK, and she was telling me, I never go to an interview on television or with a journalist without taking with me a refugee so that they can share their lived experience.
Right.
And it is true, it makes a complete difference, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And keep it grounded in reality. And I think those projects that deal with people surviving something, it's very important that those survivors have a strong voice in the project. You have to honor those people and honor their stories, and that's an important way of doing that.
Yeah. So, something you've started to do, Ben, that I love seeing you doing. You've decided to dedicate some of your time to mentorship and offer guidance to aspiring social entrepreneurs, like you are, but obviously with a lot of expertise now. So can you tell us about that? What motivated you to make that move, and what specific experiences do you hope to pass on through that mentorship?
Thank you. Yeah. So, mentorship is something that I've benefited from since the beginning. So I've been so grateful to have those people in my life that have championed me, that have given me advice, that have given me kind of tough conversations sometimes. And so it's always been important to me to pass that along, to pay it forward in that way. I think, like we've been talking about, now is a time that it's so important that people feel empowered to become social entrepreneurs, to use business as a force for good in the world, that we're doing something that we're passionate about and creating a profit and creating a benefit for society, and it all kind of goes together. Many times people, I think, feel that that is an unattainable goal, or they don't know where to start, or they don't know, how to do that. And not everyone wants to start a business. That's okay. People may be in transition. People maybe want to start working for a social enterprise or for a nonprofit or get into some other aspect of work. And what I really aim to do is to support people in that move, in seeing themselves in that new way, and using the experience that I have in going from working in commercials, working in TV, working in different parts of the industry to this particular social impact space to say, hey, this is possible. It's not necessarily going to be a piece of cake, but it's doable, and it's something that it often takes mentorship and some kind of external support to try to navigate those things. It's another aspect of community. Like we all thrive in community, even though in our modern society we live in these little boxes, but community is really what we need. So this is one way that I feel I can contribute to community, and in this case the community of people who care about doing something positive for the world with the work that they do every day.
Yeah, and that's incredible because, as you rightly said in the past, we are used to different type of business models that perhaps were solely focused on profit, and perhaps people and planet were not so present. So, with people like you who have already developed a lot of experience in these areas, it's important to have these references for other people who are coming in. But it's like we are a bit pioneers, isn't it?
I think it's important that people feel that other people who've come before them doing this are accessible. So that's another reason why I wanted to do this, that not only the people that know me can ask me questions or get, to have that conversation. It's more of a public offering, and that people can find me and seek that out. And there's lots of other people besides me who are doing this too, and that's important. I just wanted to play a part in that, so that's why I decided to put that out there in a public way.
Yeah, and I love your saying this because I really do think that in the impact space, and it's still the case today, and it's certainly been my experience these past years, people are really making themselves very accessible, which is incredible. I always advise, if you want to, start doing something like a social enterprise or etc., do not hesitate to reach out to people, because there is a lot of openness and accessibility, and I actually really love to see this.
That's right, and people want to share their knowledge and their experience and see other people come up in this.
Yeah. So you did mention the importance of mentors in your life and in your career. So I wanted to ask you this question actually. Have there been any important mentors for you who offered you useful guidance? And can you tell us a bit more about it and how these experiences influence your perspective on social impact storytelling? What can we learn from it?
It's a great question. Like I said, I've always been really blessed to have great mentors around me. From childhood, I was actually very close with the rabbi at my synagogue growing up, David Posner. I really looked up to him and had a close relationship with him, and was able to develop, a strong bond and also get a lot of really good advice from him. Growing up, I also was mentored by many of the teachers at National Dance Institute, this dance program. Jacques d'Amboise was one of those mentors. Ellen Weinstein, who took over as artistic director from Jacques. Jacques was one of the first great American male ballet dancers. He was like, I sort of, tell people he was like the Baryshnikov of his day in the 50s and 60s. He was a big deal. And he went into public schools and started teaching dance to kids. He was not only a dancer, he was a philosopher and a poet and an artist and choreographer and composer. I mean, this man did so many things, and he was so down to earth. He was so just, walking the talk, or dancing the talk, as the case may be. He was an incredible human being. And I take his advice and his teachings with me all the time, and I continue to do that. Even in the film that we're making now, Come Dance With Me, which is about his legacy, Jacques' legacy, and the legacy and the work of National Dance Institute over the last almost 50 years. And that's a film that we're working on now as well, which is very exciting. And so many mentors like that. Scott Nielsen is a mentor of mine who I've known since college, and somebody who's just always shared his wisdom with me from the business world, from in the arts, in many different areas. My parents, a lot of mentorship in my life, and I'm so grateful for that. And I still continue to go to my mentors and ask them questions and ask them for advice. And think about, even the ones who aren't alive anymore, to say, like, what would they say? What advice would they have for me in this situation? Because it's now part of me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I really think like mentorship is almost underrated, but from the statistics I've seen, people get a lot more successful by having mentors in their life, and they are important references, or as you were saying, if you've got questions, you have people that you can reach out to, and that's just so important in anyone's life, really.
Well, the other thing about that is today we call it mentors, but for thousands of years, people called it their elders, the
Yeah,
wise people of their community. That's
yeah.
what, to me, that's what mentorship is. So, even to refer to myself as a mentor for anyone feels a little bit strange because I don't think of myself as an elder, but I have always looked for the elders, my elders, the people that I can go to look for advice. And those are mentors. So it's something that is, I think, really baked into the wisest of human traditions, and something that we've just named it something else, but it really is that reverence and learning from our elders.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to mention that there are two independent projects that you are working on, and that I know you have at heart very much, and I think you mentioned at least one of them. So I'd like to cover them both with you before we finish. The first one, you referred to it earlier, is about labor trafficking in the United States. So could you tell us a bit more about the issue and what you hope to achieve through this project? Because as you said, I don't think we think about that very much, and yet it's very real, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, in 2017, I went to Cincinnati for a project that was not related to trafficking at all, to interview a family, the DeSouza family that lives in Cincinnati, about something completely unrelated to anything to do with trafficking. They're from India, this family, wonderful, wonderful, incredible people. And I was asking them at some point, how did you come to the United States? And they said, well, it's a pretty complex story. Are you sure you want to hear it? And I said, I think so. And so they told me this story that they had been brought here on a legitimate work visa, and then when they arrived were forced to work in an Indian restaurant in Cincinnati for 18 months, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, living in this little room upstairs above the restaurant with their two young children. This was in the early 2000s. And I just was floored. I honestly didn't know that this kind of thing was happening, at least not so prevalently in the United States. You hear a lot about, sweatshops overseas, or labor violations and child labor in all different parts of especially the developing world. And you don't hear about it here. Here in the United States, you hear about sex trafficking. You don't hear about labor trafficking. So I said, how prevalent is this? And they said it's pretty prevalent. And Harold DeSouza was actually at that point serving on President Obama's U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. So this person who had been trafficked, along with his wife Dancy, he was now serving the president as an advisor, and he served a second term under Trump in Trump's first term as president. So it was just an incredible, eye-opening experience, and it's sort of like once you see that, you can't unsee it. So then you start to notice all these signs of potential trafficking in local shops and restaurants and different places in your community, and that's what happened to me. And so that's when I got fired up to say, hey, can we make a film about this? If I don't know about this, I'm sure there's a lot of other people that don't know also that would care if they knew about it. And then I was very fortunate to have Martin Sheen come on board as our executive producer. He has just been a very big champion for this project. We're still raising money for the project, so if anyone is interested in finding out more, go to tobefreefilm.com and you can find out a lot more information there and see our teaser, which really demonstrates, how we're telling the stories and how we're addressing the issue on a broad scale as well. Because at the heart of it, if you want to get rid of or drastically reduce labor traffic, you're talking about a shift in our economy. It's not a small thing to just say, oh, well, just pay people. Actually, labor trafficking is a pillar of our economy. We just don't know about it. So if we're going to change that in any significant way, a lot of the other things have to change as well. So that's, the film is going to address those issues as well as those personal stories.
Okay, perfect. So we will add a link to it in the show notes so people can find it easily as well at the end of this conversation. So thank you for sharing this with us, Ben. I also wanted to mention that you have started a podcast last year, so it's the interviewer interviewed today. But honestly, when you launched it, I found it both very brave and very touching. So it's called This Makes It Personal, right?
Yes.
And in season 1, you looked at the Israel-Hamas war, hearing from people living through it on the ground. So you've really gone personal with it, which I love. So can you tell us why you decided to cover this specific topic?
Absolutely, yes. The purpose of the podcast is to bring a personal lens to issues that feel so huge and so global and sometimes so far away. And also to bring nuance. I think nuance is something that we are sorely lacking in our society, especially with the prevalence of social media. Prevalence is an understatement. Everything is in these bite-sized chunks. We want to know, we want to be updated, we want to know what happened in like 30 seconds or less. And that does not leave a lot of space for nuance. And nuance is something that can develop when you have a conversation with someone. So that's what I wanted to do. I looked at the Israel-Hamas war and said, there's so much news coverage about this, there's so much social media posting, there's so much going on. Can I add anything? Is there anything that I can do that would be additive in a positive way, especially for a Western audience? And I have family in Israel. I've always cared about seeing peace in that region of the world for as long as I can remember. And my wife, Marielle, she and I work together on many projects, and so we worked together on this project. And she also brought a tremendous amount of insight to it. And so the first people that we had on the show are Israeli-Palestinian peace activists. So what does that mean? They are Palestinian people, and they have Israeli citizenship, and they are peace activists. They are looking towards how can peace still thrive even in a situation where there's active war going on, and it may not be today, but what can a future look like? And one of the things that I learned through having those initial conversations with Ibrahim and Amira, who I'm mentioning as those guests, was, first of all, we're sitting down, an American Jewish person with 2 Muslim Palestinian Israelis, and having a conversation. Just that first part I think is important, to just be having the conversation. And second of all, seeing that, there's a lot of things we agree on. There's some things we disagree on. How can we not get caught and stopped by the things that we disagree on and look for those, things where we can work together, help to spread positive messages, help to clarify and bring nuance and personal experience to what's going on in this conflict that's been, raging for decades? And how do we be willing to listen to the pain of the other person? Because that we've ended up in this situation where, and this is not just in this particular issue, it's in many issues, where we're in a competition for whose pain matters more. And when as soon as you get into that and you start discounting the other person's suffering or the other people's suffering, you lose, because it's over. The conversation's over before it started. And I'll tell you a quick story if we can. I was up in near Syracuse in a little town called Cazenovia, filming another project. And I went into a coffee shop, and I had a yellow ribbon on, which is for the hostages, for the Israeli hostages, or the hostages who were taken from Israel and are being held in Gaza. Walking into the coffee shop, there were all these signs in the window that said Free Palestine. And And so I walked into the coffee place to get my morning coffee, and there's a woman who comes out wearing a keffiyeh, which is a, Palestinian scarf. And she looks at me and she says, what's the ribbon for? And I said, well, it's for the hostages. And she said, and what about the Palestinians? And I said, and the Palestinians should also be safe and free and thriving. And she said, okay. We actually, had a really nice conversation. I told her, but she ended up being the owner of the coffee shop. I told her about the podcast. Later, I see that she actually went online and donated to support the podcast.
Oh.
And that never would have happened if we just looked at each other's like symbols on the outside. We never would have had a conversation. We never would have engaged. I appreciate that she even bothered to say something to me in the first place, because people might assume like, oh, yellow ribbon, you only care about one group of people, or, the opposite. But we had a conversation that was based in humanity. And that's the purpose of the podcast, is to get people to have those conversations or see something different, see some nuance. I think, again, like we're caught up in these slogans of like, one group is right and the other group is wrong, or one group is going to go away. This is this sort of magical thinking that's pervaded this whole conversation in the media. There's 7 million Jews and 7 million Arabs in this tiny strip of land that some people call Israel and some people call Palestine. None of them are going anywhere. We have to find a way for peaceful coexistence to happen, one way or another. And that's the main thing, is that no one's going away. And I think that has to be remembered, and valuing the other person's perspective.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have these conversations. I have myself followed what's happened in that region ever since I was a teenager, so it was a long time ago. And it seems like it's endless, and the heritage of the pain and suffering, as you said, it's something big in people's lives. And we do need to hear each other, isn't it? I don't know what the answers are and what the future will bring, but I certainly think trying to understand each other and having these conversations. And you said something earlier that I loved, keeping it real, like you've done with this coffee shop owner. It's just so important. Yeah.
Right. It can't just be in the podcast. It's got to be in real life also. It's got to be, how we engage with our neighbors, how we engage in our community, and to be willing to sit down and have conversations. I think that is, one of the hardest things, but that's where it starts. I mean, if we want anyone else to create peace over there, we got to start by having conversations here. And we certainly don't want to bring more conflict and more fighting to other parts of the world based on, people not having peace over there. We want to create peace, starting wherever a person is, creating peace and having that ripple out. To me, that's very important.
So I really wish you the best with these two projects we've mentioned.
Can I mention one other project, Ingrid? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, of course.
So the other independent documentary that we're working on, which I did mention, but I just want to share it again, is Come Dance With Me, which is this film about Jacques and National Dance Institute, Jacques d'Amboise. And it's a program I've been involved with for. Jacques was a mentor of mine for 30 years, just about, until he passed away a few years ago. And, the privilege to be able to make a film that will, is meant to pay tribute to him, and also to show how the work that he started really has evolved. And it's about, again, bringing the arts into normal educational spaces, into public schools, into children's lives, regardless of where the kid comes from, regardless of their background, regardless of anything. Actually, when I was a child dancing in the program, Jacques and Ellen brought Israeli and Palestinian kids to dance with us in New York together.
Oh, so nice.
So it's like, that is really taking the arts and applying it to life in a way that can be super transformational. So this film is meant to share that. And I'm very thrilled to have on board as executive producers of that project Mandy Patinkin and Catherine Grody, who are, big advocates, and their child was actually in the program at the same time as I was as a kid. So we've seen that impact firsthand. So I'm glad to be in the process of making that film as well.
Yeah, amazing. And thank you for sharing that project with us. I wasn't aware of it at all, so I'm glad you did because I told you I love the arts. I know how transformational it can be and the impact it can have. And that's also part of what you and I do. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear about it. So if we ignore any of these projects, one of my last questions to you, if you could work on any new projects and money or time wouldn't matter, what would be your big dream project?
Something I've wanted to do for several years is create a space where filmmakers can come together. I imagine it being in a barn, sort of a transformed barn. That's a creative space for filmmakers to do this kind of impactful work, but to be in a physical space together. So many times we're working remotely with, which is beautiful and so important to be able to work with people anywhere. There is also something magical about being in the room together. So getting these creative minds who care, similarly about social impact work through film to do our dream projects, to do the projects that we want to create, and then taking them through to the social impact campaign, part of it as well. Taking it through to the social impact campaign part as well, so that when people see this work, they're actually inspired to do something, and here's some resources of what you can actually do. So I imagine having this kind of a space, and I think that definitely would be a dream come true.
Amazing. Do you realize that we are going back to all of us, right?
Thank you for pointing that out.
Perfect ending. I love it. So, I just wanted to finish by asking, is there any other topic or message that we haven't discussed together that you would like to share with our audience now before we close?
I think that, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to do this and to have this conversation with you because, as much as we are in the work, it's sometimes great to be able to step back a little bit and reflect. I just hope that, anybody listening to this will listen to it through the lens of how can this positively impact my life? How can I take whatever I'm hearing today, whatever these meanings and words are meaning in my own filter, and do something positive in the world? That's to me what I care about the most and what I would love to see happen for people. I think that when I'm looking for inspiration, I look to listen to things, to watch things, to get ideas, to read books, to get out of my own head a little bit. So if someone's listening to this with that opening and something that you or I said here today is that inspiration for them, I'd say go for it. Don't just let it be a little seed of an idea, like do something, go for it.
Yeah, it's always transforming, get into action, into something concrete, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Ben. So this podcast is called Shades of Life, with the idea that we each hold the power to paint life with our own colors to leave a meaningful imprint on the planet. And I always end it with the same question for the guest. If you were a color, what would it be and why? And it can be anything you want and for any reason you want.
I love that question. So I'm going to go with green and maybe various shades of green. Green to me, means creativity. It means birth and rebirth, nature, that connection with nature and, regeneration, not only in agriculture, like we were talking about earlier, but in anything that we do, renewing life each day. So, that right now we're in, the beginning, sort of feels like the beginning of spring still here. And many of the trees don't have leaves on them yet, but we're seeing those sparks of green come out. And to me, it's an incredible feeling to start to see the green after the sort of browns of winter have subsided. So I'll go with green.
Yeah, that's great. I'm in London and these past couple of weeks, everybody's saying the same because it really feels like spring here. Like it's sunny again, nature looks very vibrant again, and everybody is in such good mood with a big smile on their face, and everybody's saying the same, like it makes such a difference. And yeah, it's all about creation, nature creation, and I feel that it ties in with what you do because you create through what you do. so much. I think it ties in with you so well. So yeah, a spring creation for greens. I love it.
Thank you.
So Ben, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm so glad we got to catch up again through it. It was a pleasure to have you, and I'm glad we could discuss these topics with you. I wish you so well with the new mentorship. I know the people who will be in touch with you and benefit from it will gain so much, because you've got so much to offer and you're such a genuine person as well. So I can't recommend it enough.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I so appreciate you inviting me onto the show. I hope we can share a link with people for the mentorship opportunity.
Yeah.
And this is beautiful. I love your podcast, and I wish you all the best, and I hope you keep doing lots more and exposing people to lots more points of view.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you everyone for watching and listening today.
Thank you.